Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to start talking about the Phillips curve, expectations, and then we're going to get into sort of Milton Friedman's K% rule and his critique of the Federal Reserve. Okay, but first off, let's start with the Phillips curve. Okay, and what this shows us is the relationship between the inflation rate and the unemployment rate. Okay, and the basic idea here, okay, so we can say this will be the inflation rate, and this will be unemployment. Okay, and the basic idea here is that if you increase the inflation rate, which, as we're going to see, is essentially the same as expansionary monetary policy, then the unemployment rate will decrease. Okay, so if I start, let's say here, if I increase the inflation rate, I will decrease the unemployment rate. And if I decrease the inflation rate, I will increase the unemployment rate. And so that gets us a line that looks something like that. Okay. So the basic idea, again, if the Fed increases inflation, then unemployment will decrease. Okay, and so that's the idea. And notice that this is the Fed's dual mandate. They want to prevent inflation, but also decrease unemployment. And so they face a trade-off, is what the Phillips curve says, between their two goals, right? They can't both decrease inflation and decrease unemployment, and so they must make a trade-off between the two. Okay, and the idea here is relatively straightforward. Okay, so first we need to recognize that inflation we need to recognize that inflation is a monetary phenomenon. Okay, and what this means is that inflation is caused by increases in the money supply. And the idea behind this is fairly intuitive. Okay, so if I were, let's say, to double every single person's bank accounts today, right? So I double it all right now, okay? Or let's say I do it tonight, okay? And none of the prices change at the store. You're going to go out and probably spend and buy a lot of stuff, right? You'll increase your spending, just like what expansionary monetary policy says, okay? But what do you think all the stores are going to do the next day, right? They're probably going to double their prices, okay? And so the idea is that whenever the Fed increases the supply of money, what that's going to do sort of in the long run is just increase the number of dollars that everything takes. So if the Fed doubles the supply or the number of dollars in the economy, in the long run, all of the dollar prices of things will double. Okay, and so the long run effect of monetary policy is very little, if anything. Okay, and so the idea is that in the short run, if the Federal Reserve increases the rate of inflation, so if they just print more money, okay, if they print more money and flood the economy with cash, basically, they will decrease unemployment. And this just comes straight from our aggregate demand, aggregate supply model. Okay, so if we are in a bust, if we're in a bust, the unemployment rate is going to be high, or at least higher than the natural rate, because we are producing less than we could. If the Fed increases the inflation rate, which is essentially expansionary monetary policy, aggregate demand increases. Notice that the price level increases, which is what inflation is. It's a change in the overall price level, but the unemployment rate decreases as the recession ends. Okay, and so the Phillips curve is at some level a pretty intuitive thing. Okay, but it comes into play, or it comes into a little bit more importance when we start thinking about the role of expectations. Okay, and so what if people expect the inflation to happen? What if we expect the Federal Reserve to increase the supply of money, right? And what if you, so let's pretend that you're looking to hire someone, or you're looking to go work for a business, and they offer you a salary, but you expect the inflation rate to be 100%, right? Which would be astronomically high, by the way. Okay, you would want to adjust your salary today to account for that inflation, right? Or think about, like, if you were a bank making a loan and you expect the rate of inflation to be 2%, then you have to actually make more than 2% as your interest if you want to actually make money, right? If you give people a loan at 2% and the inflation rate is 2%, then you're not actually making any money on that loan at all. Okay, and so if people expect the price level to go up in the future, they will build those expectations into their model or into their prices today. So if I expect that the dollar price of my product will be twice as high tomorrow, I will raise my prices today. So expected inflation has little to no effect on an economy. Okay, so if the Federal Reserve announces beforehand that they're going to raise interest rates, or engage, or let's say lower interest rates in the near future, that will actually just lower the interest rates today, and their actions in the future will have absolutely no effect, right? And so the key to all of this, the key to monetary policy, and by that I mean inflation here, is that it has to be unexpected, right? If you want to do if the Fed wants to do effective monetary policy, then the Fed has to take into account that people probably expect them to increase or decrease the money supply, and then actually do it more than people expect them to do, right? So this is like what was going on in Zimbabwe a few years ago when their central bank started engaging in expansionary monetary policy, right? They started engaging in expansionary monetary policy, found that what they were doing wasn't enough, but then that people also expected them to engage in expansionary monetary policy, and so had to go even further down that road. Okay, and so what ended up happening is hyperinflation there, where we started seeing $100 trillion Zimbabwe notes, which was a crazy period in world history. Okay, so the key here, the great insight of the Phillips curve, is that if everyone expects inflation, then the Fed can't actually do anything. They can't affect anything at all, right? Their power to shift aggregate demand or move anything around is completely nullified. Okay, so the key for the Federal Reserve is doing things that people don't expect them to do. Okay?